Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So I'm finally back on this channel. I've had a couple of months off. If you want to know what I've been up to in those last couple of months, then you can check out my vlog channel. I will link it down below. Anyway, we'll catch up a little bit at the end. Today's video is what I wish I knew when I first started sewing. I thought I'd break myself in a little bit easy to one of these because I can talk straight off my head. The first thing that I wish I knew when I first started sewing was that sewing in a straight line will come with practice. The thing is, when I started to sew, I learnt from YouTube. I was watching other YouTubers, their tutorials, and I learnt 100% how to sew in that way. Wow, when you're watching them, they look perfect, don't they? They're sewing a straight line. Every seam is utterly perfect, not an 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 of an inch out of place. But then when I went under the sewing machine and I started to sew, I was like this all over the show. Sometimes I'd be an inch out of where I should be. And I was like, what's happening? I'm never going to be able to sew. I tried all sorts of things. I had a little magnetic guide that used to move if I moved the fabric against it, so that was no good. Someone suggested that I draw on the fabric, and I was like, I can't do that. That's cheating. That's cheating. No, it's not cheating. It's going to guide you. It's going to help you. No one's going to know. The next thing I wish I knew was something, well, I don't know if I wish I knew it or not, but I should have known it, was that when you learn to sew, you never stop learning. I learned how to put two pieces of fabric together. Maybe I learnt to put a zip in. Maybe I even learnt to put a button in. At the beginning of my journey, I really believed that it was a case of I will learn these skills and then I can do any sewing for the rest of my life. As I went on to learn, that is not the case. 10 years later and I am still learning new things about sewing. I think up to a point it's up to you how much learning you do. Because if you just want to know the basics, you can get away with the basics. But if you want to develop your craft and be really good at your craft, then you're going to be continuously learning. I found once I learned how to do one thing, there was something else I wanted to learn how to do. I remember thinking at one time, I thought this was a one and done. No, that is not the case. Not if you take pride in your sewing, that you want to be the best that you can be. I can sew a lot of things with my eyes closed now. In fact, most times I don't even refer to the instructions. However, I would like to be able to draft my own blocks. That's something I've never done. I made one very feeble attempt at it many years ago and then gave up, but it's something I would like to learn, and that's a whole new learning curve that is going to escalate my sewing even further up. Have a think to yourself, what is going to improve your sewing? It's going to take you up a notch or up a level. So the next thing I wish I knew, and this harks back to something I said just now, is that you do not need patterns to make clothes. I come across Tilly in the Buttons. I was searching how to make clothes. She came up and she sold patterns, and that was the beginning of my deep dive into having a pattern stash and buying lots of patterns and never actually making them. By the by, I went straight in from that angle that you need patterns, and I felt that having a pattern makes things really easy, but actually you don't need a pattern. Patterns are expensive, especially these days. You can get super cheap patterns, but if you want a quality pattern that is a trendsetter, then you're going to be paying over the odds for it, upwards of £20 or $20. And so that can get expensive really, really quickly. If you aren't new to sewing, I urge you to learn to sew your own blocks straight away. There is a learning curve to that. I understand. I haven't done it myself. But there is a learning curve to that. But once you get over that learning curve, you'll never have to buy a pattern ever again. And you can basically design anything to your heart's desire. So you're not actually limited to the designs that other pattern designers have come up with. But designing your own blocks is not the only way you can actually have a piece of clothing that you've made. You could also trace your clothes. If you've got a piece of clothing that you absolutely love, there's nothing wrong with tracing it. You'll just want to lay a piece of paper down, fold your garment over very carefully, getting rid of any creases, and then trace around it, including a seam allowance. And that will create your own pattern. To be honest, I would have saved myself an absolute fortune if I did not go down the patterns route. I'm going to move over a little bit because I've got a damaged coccyx and it hurts when I stay in one position. Please ignore that stuff over there. I'm in the process of moving, and so we're packing up over there. So just ignore that. So the next thing I wish I knew when I was a beginner is that I should not give my skills away for free. And by that, I mean pattern testing for free. So there's lots of pattern companies out there that rely on volunteers, essentially, to pattern test their patterns. They cannot release the patterns for sale unless they are pattern tested. So they will reach out to the sewing community and ask, does anyone want to sew this? I just need some feedback. You'll get a free pattern out of it. Now, I jumped on this mainly because I didn't have money to buy patterns, and this is a way that I was able to do that. But the more I did it, and I am quite experienced in doing that, the more I started to feel like this is work, this is a job, and I should be paid for it. I did a video a few years ago talking about this. I will link it down below. When you are pattern testing, you are given an incomplete pattern, so it's not the final draft of the pattern, so there could be something wrong with it. You then have to purchase your own fabric, take notes, take photographs, clear photographs. They're very specific sets of instructions for you, and then you have to give feedback afterwards. Not only are they utilising your skills and experience, but they're utilising your pattern stash, you're willing to help, your time, your labour, your skills, everything. They are utilising for free. They say it's not for free because you get a pattern in return. To that, I say, would you give a plumber a plunger as reward for clearing out your toilet? No, you wouldn't at all. You literally cannot do the thing they're asking for without the pattern. So if they're giving you the pattern, that's because they have to. It's not a reward for you. More recently, I think some pattern companies are now paying a nominal amount, which is just enough to cover the fabric, which is something. But for me, I wish I had not gone down that road, because my skills and experience are worthy of payment. And also, if a company cannot afford to bring in a pattern tester for their company, then they do not have a workable model. You cannot rely on the free work of other people to sustain your business. A little rant there, but that's how I feel. I feel quite strongly about that, as you'll see in that other video if you go and watch it. If you are liking this video and you want to see more like it, do hit that subscribe button. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what was the one thing you wish you knew right at the beginning of your sewing journey. If you get extra value from this video, consider purchasing me a coffee. Link down below. So the next thing is to practice techniques before you do them. To be honest, I didn't do this in the beginning. I was a bit kamikaze. I was like, where's my Liberty fabric? Let's get that out. £30 a metre. Let's just go for gold. And then I completely ruin it. I wish I knew that if you practice in the beginning, then you are going to have a much better result in the end. So really, I would suggest that you actually make a toile, a whole practice garment, before you cut into your favourite fabric, because when you come to make it in your favourite fabric, you're going to know what you're doing, you're going to make less mistakes, and you're going to have a better garment. But even if you don't want to do a toile, because I know it's not that popular, you can practice certain things. So if you've got to put a zip in, you can practice that on scrap paper. I always say this, don't I? I always say this. scrap fabric, not scrap paper. If you're screaming at me, well, I've only got one zip. Well, you can sew that zip in a scrap piece of fabric and then unpick it afterwards. But the fact of the matter is that if you practice before you do it in your main garment, then you are going to make a much better job. The next one follows on from that last one, and I kind of did touch on it, and that is don't use your expensive fabrics first. When you first learn to sew, you will make mistakes, you will bodge it up, you will have complete and utter disasters. We all do. I did many times. Probably I've had disasters even when I'm not a beginner. So as a beginner, you will mess it up. You will completely, royally mess it up. So do not use your beloved, most loved fabric in the beginning. Get an old bed sheet. Go to the charity shop, the thrift shop, and you can find some bedding or a tablecloth or something. Even something quite pretty that you wouldn't mind wearing, and you can have it as a wearable toile. Don't go buying fabric that costs 20, 30 pounds a metre. I bought some linen just before I stopped sewing when I was sorting my home out. It was about 35 pounds a metre and I bought 3 metres. Now, if I got that out and just sewed it, even now, I would not just get that out and start sewing it. I will do a practice run first. Oh, this next one, guys, this next one, it's a really, really big one. Let me move. This one, biggie, 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 biggie. I really, really wish I would have saved myself an absolute fortune. Get it out, Claire, get it out. That is, you do not need lots of features on your sewing machine. Certainly when you're starting, you're not. I would say the only reason you might need lots of features is if you were a quilter. And even then probably you would buy a quilting machine, not a sewing machine. The first machine I bought had like 30 stitches on it. The only stitches I used was a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch and a buttonhole. But that didn't deter me, did it? It did not deter me. I wanted to upgrade from that one because it was a bit rickety. It was going like this across the table. And so I decided I need to upgrade. At the time, I fell in love with the sewing machine that Tilly and the Buttons was using, and that was the Janome DKS 100. And there were 2 machines. One had like 40 stitches and one had 100 stitches. And I was like, I've got to have the 100 stitches because there's a stitch in there where you could sew a cat. And I'm like, got to have it. Got to have it. And guess what? Yeah, you've guessed it. You've guessed it. I didn't use those stitches at all. I got the machine, tested out the cat stitch. I'm like, oh, that's cute. Never touched it again. Again, was just using the straight stitch, a zigzag and the buttonhole. But did I let that deter me? I had that machine for about 18 months and I'm like, I want to get a high-end one. Not a like, I need a mortgage one. Lauren Guthrie from Guthrie and Garney, she had this machine and I was in love with it, and I'd seen a few others have it as well, and I was like, oh, I'm so easy. I could be marketed so easily, targeted with marketing so easily, because I'm like, oh, they've got it, it's so pretty, I must have it. No more, I'm not like that now, but I was like that. So this machine retailed at £1,300. I found it for £1,000 and it had 350 to 400 stitches on it. Why on earth would anyone need 400 stitches on the sewing machine? If I was buying a sewing machine now, I would get a basic one, like this Bonina here. It just does the basic. It has like 10 stitches. That is absolutely fine. Really, you just want a good quality machine. A Bonina is a great quality. A Brother, a Janome, they're great quality machines. Stop looking at those sewing machines with all the stitches that you don't need, because you don't need them, okay? So the next thing I wish I knew is something that has been like a thread running throughout the conversation so far. And that is to not fall for the commercialisation of sewing. It has changed significantly since I started sewing. As I say, I learnt to sew on YouTube. There were hardly any YouTube channels there doing sewing, certainly dressmaking. I don't think there was any, if I'm honest. The pattern industry wasn't really there, certainly for plus size models it wasn't. models. Oh yes, I'm a model. The sewing pattern industry wasn't there for plus sizes, and so I didn't buy a lot. But now, not only is there more pattern companies than you can blink an eye at, which in a way is good, but in a way it's not good. There's more fabric shops than you can talk about. There is a gadget for everything you can do manually on your sewing machine. There is a gadget that makes it easier, quicker, faster paced. It's going to take the effort out of it. You can buy something for everything. And now, because of the explosion of influencers, you are being sold to left, right, and centre. It's really, really hard to not buy shit for sewing. Wherever you go for your social media to look at sewing content, you are going to come across things where people are selling stuff to you. Don't buy into it. You don't need most of it. I did a video and it shows you all the things I bought that you just don't need. You really only need minimum things. I did this video where I told you what you need as a beginner sewer. Just stick to that video because that's all you need. So something else I wish I knew when I started sewing was that when you make adjustments in one area, it's going to make problems in another area. I would say the very first thing you need to learn when you're going to adjust your patterns is you need to understand construction. You need to understand how garments work, how we make 2D into 3D, because if you don't understand those rules, as I didn't in the beginning, and you make adaptations, you'll wonder why you got it fitting in one area and not another. So I remember I changed the sleeve head on a jacket, and then the sleeve, the seam allowance was all wrong on the bottom of the wrist. So this next tip is one that I really wish I knew at the beginning, and if I did, it might have put me off. So probably it's just as well I didn't know it. But you should know it because forearmed is forewarned, and forewarned is knowledge. It is that if you're going to sew plus size clothing of any kind, and probably some people who sew average size clothing as well, you're going to have to learn to grade and alter your patterns. These days, there's a lot of patterns out there that are graded to bigger sizes. So the grading issue isn't such a big issue. But I think having that knowledge of grading is going to make your life easier because there may be little bits of the pattern that you do need to grade, especially if you make adaptations. Now, making adaptations is something you cannot get away with, especially as a plus size person. You are going to have to make adaptations because when they make a template, I've talked about this before, when they make a template, it is just that. It is a template. They're making it to fit lots of different bodies. So they cannot possibly do a pattern that is bespoke to your figure only. If you come across a pattern company where their patterns fit you properly, then stay with that pattern company because that's brilliant. That's a-okay, and that is a coincidence, and you're very, very lucky. But for most people, patterns will not fit perfectly and you will have to do adaptations. But the good thing is the more you sew, the more patterns you make, you'll get to know which areas you need to adapt, especially for the same pattern company, because pattern companies use a block, which means they base all their patterns off that. And that's, well, number one, it's easier for them because it saves them a lot of work, but it's good for us because we know what to expect from them. Take these tips and utilise them. Go into sewing with an expectation that is going to be met. If you want to know about what's going on with me, let's just have a very quick chat. I'm not going to go into great detail about it because you can follow me on my other channel where I talk at great length about my life. So in case you don't know, me and my husband are splitting up. We're still living together right now. We're in the process of splitting up and I am in the process of finding somewhere to live. So with that in mind, I have packed up my sewing machines. All my sewing stuff is packed up, either packed up or in my nice new sideboard there. Either way, I can't get my sewing machines out right now to sew. So that is not happening for the foreseeable. It will happen at some point, but I don't have a timeline for that. Until then, we're going to talk about lots of sewing things. So let me know down below the sort of things that you would like me to talk about. Maybe some patterns. Do you want me to have a look at some patterns that you might like to buy that I'd recommend? Is there any information you want on specific things? I can sit and talk to you about stuff like that. I just can't demonstrate it right now. Also, I have just started another channel. Yes, I'm going to have a whole catalogue of channels at this stage, but this one is called Carnivore Claire. I have started the carnivore diet. Now, if you don't agree with that diet, then that's fair enough. You don't need to tell me that. But if you do, if you're interested in that kind of diet, then do follow me on my new channel, Carnivore Claire. I'm about to go and film a video for that now. So head over there to learn more, and I will catch you in the very next video. So happy to be back. Mwah, 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 mwah.